From Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, whose rivalry spilled beyond their official bouts, to Larry Holmes and Trevor Berbick, who took their tension into a real fight. These are boxing legends who settled things without a referee. Keep watching for Riddick Bowe and Bowe-Golota, whose bout ended in a massive ringside brawl that left people injured. Mike Tyson had already become boxing's most feared young heavyweight by the mid-1980s, and one of the men who tested him in the ring came back looking for more outside it. The New York gang leader Mitch had previously faced Tyson in the ring during the boxer's meteoric rise to stardom, managing to go the distance across 10 rounds with Tyson in 1986 at Madison Square Garden, 6 months before Tyson became the youngest heavyweight champion in history. Green survived that fight until the final bell by grappling with Tyson at close quarters. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. Green was already furious with Tyson, claiming boxing promoter Don King had shortchanged him and craved a profitable rematch that seemed unlikely to happen in the ring, so he went looking for one on the street instead. Tyson was supposed to fight Frank Bruno in the fall of 1988 for a cash prize of $5 million. Instead, he smacked down Mitch Blood Green for nothing but pride at Dapper Dan's boutique in Harlem. Their rematch on Harlem's streets in the early hours of the morning proved to be a brief and brutal encounter. Green had spent years waiting for this moment, wanting to prove he could hurt the young champion outside the rope, the way he couldn't quite finish him inside them. It didn't go that way. The fight ended fast, and it ended badly for Green. Reports out of the encounter described Tyson breaking his own hand on Green's face and fearing in the moment that he might have seriously hurt the man. This wasn't a shoving match that got broken up by handlers before anything happened. This was a heavyweight champion in his physical prime unloading on a former opponent on a New York sidewalk at 4 in the morning with no referee to step in and no 12-ounce gloves to soften the blow. What makes the Green encounter different from a lot of boxer gets into a scuffle stories is that Green had a documented grudge dating back to money he believed he was owed, and he actively went looking for the confrontation. This wasn't an ambush or a random bar fight. It was a rematch nobody sanctioned, fought under streetlights instead of stadium lights, and it happened at a moment when Tyson was the single most dangerous heavyweight on the planet, riding an unbeaten record and a reputation that had grown men refusing to even look him in the eye before their fights. Tyson's willingness to engage, rather than walk away, surrounded as he usually was by an entourage that could have simply pulled him into a car, says something about who he was at that stage of his career and life. He'd grown up in Brownsville, one of the roughest corners of New York, and by his own account, and by the number of scrapes he found himself in before he was even a teenager, street fighting was baked into how he handled conflict. The ring gave that instinct a paycheck and a set of rules. Outside the ring, in a spot like Harlem at 4 in the morning, those rules didn't apply, and Tyson didn't pretend they did. The Green fight became boxing folklore almost instantly, retold by people who were nowhere near Dapper Dan's that night, because it fit exactly what people already believed about Tyson: that he was a genuine knockout artist, even without the padded gloves and the referee counting to 10. It also cemented Green's own legend, not for beating Tyson, but for being one of the very few men who ever stood across from him, twice, and lived to tell the story on camera for decades afterward. But Green wasn't the only person outside the ring who found themselves on the wrong end of Tyson's temper. Stories about Tyson's private life during his championship years are full of encounters that never made it into a boxing record book. One of the more discussed, though heavily disputed, involves an alleged confrontation with Hollywood actor Wesley Snipes. The story came to light after Tyson's former bodyguard, Rudy Gonzalez, wrote about it in a tell-all book, claiming the former heavyweight champion once knocked out Snipes inside a restaurant bathroom over a dispute involving a woman. According to that account, Tyson was seeing a woman who told him she was visiting a friend one night, and after having her followed, discovered the friend was the actor. Gonzalez claims Tyson confronted Snipes at a restaurant. The two went into a bathroom together, a loud noise was heard, and Tyson emerged alone while Snipes was found unconscious inside. That story, unlike the Green fight, has never been confirmed by the two men actually involved. Mike Tyson and Wesley Snipes have both denied that they got physical with one another, and Snipes later said on a radio show that Tyson's former bodyguard made the story up entirely. It's worth including here, not as confirmed fact, but as an example of just how much mythology built up around Tyson during his championship years, a reputation so intense that stories didn't need a signed police report to spread and stick. Even years after his championship reign ended, Tyson's issues outside the ring kept surfacing during his career comebacks. One night in Memphis, after Tyson dispatched an easy opponent, reporters noted that his problems outside the ring remained a riddle he couldn't solve. Tyson himself admitted he had issues to deal with, saying he was in pain and fighting serious demons. That kind of honesty delivered in a post-fight press conference rather than a courtroom was rare for a heavyweight champion, and it framed everything else people had heard about his behavior outside the ring. The fights, the arrests, the chaos, as symptoms of something much bigger than a short temper. Tyson wasn't hiding it. He was living it out loud, in public, fight after fight. If Tyson's street fights were about pride and old grudges from the neighborhood, Ali's physical confrontations outside the ring were built entirely on decades of personal rivalry with one man, Joe Frazier. And the strangest part is, some of their most famous physical clashes didn't happen in Madison Square Garden or the Philippines. They happened on a television studio floor. Before their second fight in January of 1974, Ali and Frazier were brought together by ABC to review tape of their first encounter with commentator Howard Cosell. It was meant to be a straightforward broadcast. It became a wrestling match. During the filming, Frazier mentioned that Ali had to go to the hospital after their first fight, and Ali fired back that Frazier's own hospital stay lasted a month, prompting Frazier to say he was merely resting from 3 weeks in a Philadelphia hospital for high blood pressure and a kidney infection. That exchange alone would have been enough tension for one television segment. It wasn't close to enough for these two. As Frazier turned to ask the younger Rahman Ali, "You in this too?" Muhammad sprang to his feet and grabbed Frazier in a bear hug. The two men tumbled to the ground and were separated by their camps soon after. This was live tape in a studio, in front of network cameras. Not a street corner, not a bar, but an ABC set, with a legendary broadcaster sitting a few feet away doing nothing to stop it. Cosell simply described the scuffle without moving from his chair, and a producer who was in the studio that day recalled it as a lot of pushing, shoving, hugging, and rolling. Ali later explained why he'd gotten physical rather than just talking trash back. He said Frazier's eyes meant it, that when Frazier was standing over him, he genuinely didn't know what Frazier was about to do next. That's a heavyweight champion admitting on the record that he thought a fight, a real one, not a boxing match, was actually about to break out on a TV set. Frazier, for his part, considered the interview over the moment it turned physical, and made clear he'd do the rest of his talking in the ring. The wrestling match on the studio floor wasn't even the first time these two nearly came to blows off camera control. Days earlier, Ali and Frazier had appeared together on the Dick Cavett Show, where tension boiled beneath humor, including the removing of jackets and mock blows between the pair. That appearance was tense, but stayed just short of a real physical clash. The ABC studio incident a few days later crossed that line completely. Throughout that entire taping, Ali went out of his way to demean Frazier and everything he'd accomplished, belittling everything Frazier said, and pushing hard to get a reaction out of him. Following the altercation, Frazier actually walked out of the studio, telling people he didn't want anyone calling him ignorant, and that he was sick of taking Ali's abuse, while Ali stayed behind and finished reviewing the fight tape as if nothing had happened. This wasn't manufactured drama for ratings, even though it certainly made for great television. The bad blood between Ali and Frazier ran deep and personal, stretching back years before that studio session, rooted in things Ali had said about Frazier during their political and public disagreements. Comments that Frazier took as genuine personal insults rather than boxing theater. By the time they were sitting across from Cosell reviewing old fight tape, there was nothing performative left in the tension. None of Frazier's resentment had abated, and it was clear to everyone watching when Frazier tried to wring Ali's neck during that live television interview. 4 days later, they fought for real in the ring at Madison Square Garden, and Ali won a unanimous decision. But the studio brawl had already told the world something the judges' scorecards couldn't capture, that whatever happened between the bell and the final round, Ali and Frazier were never going to simply shake hands and move on. Their rivalry was one of the very few in boxing history where the outside-the-ring physical confrontations became just as talked about. Decades later, as the fights themselves, Ali's willingness to get physical off the clock wasn't limited to Frazier either. Before his fight against Ernie Terrell, a pre-fight interview in ABC Studios turned into a physical altercation. After Terrell repeatedly called Ali by his birth name, prompting Ali to confront him about it directly on camera. Ali had changed his name years earlier as part of his religious conversion, and having an opponent refuse to use his new name, especially on national television, wasn't something he was willing to let slide with just words. The pattern across Ali's career is clear. He was a master of verbal warfare who was also perfectly willing to escalate that warfare into something physical the moment he felt disrespected, whether the cameras were rolling for a sanctioned fight or not. Larry Holmes spent years as one of the most dominant heavyweight champions in history, and even in his 40s, well past his championship peak, he was still willing to chase a man down a Florida street and beat him across the hoods of parked cars over nothing more than a comment made in a press conference. The night in question started as a comeback fight. Holmes had hung up his gloves following a loss to Mike Tyson, but felt he had unfinished business, which led him to fight at the Diplomat Hotel against Tim Anderson. A fight Holmes dominated easily, taking Anderson out with body shots and a right hook just minutes into the first round. That should have been the entire story of the night. It wasn't even close. Trevor Berbick, a former opponent of Holmes and a former heavyweight champion himself, showed up at the post-fight press conference looking to stir things up. Reporters asked Holmes a simple question: would he consider fighting Berbick again someday? With Berbick sitting right there in the audience, Holmes answered flatly that he wouldn't fight him, saying he didn't like his attitude. That single sentence, delivered in front of cameras, lit the fuse. Soon after, a publicist for the event went to bring Holmes to a television interview, but before he could even reach Holmes's hotel suite, he found Holmes already moving with purpose toward the elevator, clearly intent on getting his hands on Berbick. This wasn't a spontaneous scuffle that broke out because two men bumped into each other in a hallway. Holmes had heard what Berbick said or how Berbick was carrying himself and made a conscious decision to go find him. Holmes spotted Berbick out in front of the hotel, and according to a valet parking employee who witnessed it, Holmes came rushing out and started kicking and punching Berbick, who ran out onto the street with Holmes still chasing and swinging until police managed to separate the two men. If the story had ended there, it would already be one of the wildest post-fight incidents in boxing history. It didn't end there. As word of the brawl spread back to the press room inside the hotel, reporters raced through the lobby and out the front door, where they found Berbick shouting to the gathering crowd that Holmes had punched him and that everybody had seen it. Berbick clearly believed the fight was over and wanted witnesses to back up his version of events. He was wrong about it being over. Moments later, Holmes ran across the tops of two parked cars and leaped onto Berbick, knocking him down and pummeling him until police once again had to break up the fight. Think about the image there for a second. A former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, in his 40s, running across the roofs of parked cars on a public street in Florida to get at another former champion. This wasn't a shove and separate situation that security handled in 10 seconds. Police had to physically intervene twice. The whole thing spilled onto South Ocean Drive, a main road also known as A1A, and was triggered entirely by remarks the two fighters had made at that post-fight news conference. Two heavyweight champions, both of whom had held the same title at different points, ended up brawling on a public highway because of pride, old history, and a comment about attitude that Berbick simply couldn't let go unanswered. What's remarkable about the Holmes-Berbick incident, compared to some of the other stories in this list, is how well documented it is. This wasn't a second-hand account from a bodyguard's book years later. Reporters were on scene. A hotel valet gave an eyewitness account with his name attached. It happened outside a hotel full of press who had just watched the sanctioned fight and were still hanging around for interviews. There was no ambiguity, no denial issued later, no dueling accounts. Two boxing legends fought in the street, in front of witnesses, and everybody who was there told largely the same version of what happened. It's also a reminder that these men didn't stop being fighters just because they retired from the ring, or because the record books stopped counting their wins. Holmes had spent his entire adult life solving problems with his fists inside a boxing ring, under rules with a referee and 12-ounce gloves cushioning the blows. When Berbick's comment got under his skin, Holmes solved it the only way he really knew how. Except this time there was no bell, no scoring, and no gloves. Just two aging champions, a hotel parking lot, and years of pride finally boiling over. Some of these stories involve two fighters throwing hands after the cameras stopped rolling. This one is different, because the chaos happened during the broadcast, inside the ring itself, and it pulled in dozens of people who had never laced up a glove in their lives, including the mayor of New York City. The fight was Riddick Bowe against Andrew Golota, a heavyweight matchup at Madison Square Garden that for 6 rounds was a genuine boxing lesson delivered by the underdog. Bowe, a former undisputed heavyweight champion who'd beaten Evander Holyfield 7 months earlier, stood across from Golota, an unbeaten Polish contender and Olympic bronze medalist with a powerful jab and heavy hands. Golota was winning, comfortably. Golota controlled long stretches of the fight, and Bowe looked overmatched, clearly out of shape, and struggling as the bout advanced into the middle rounds. But Golota had a problem that had followed him throughout his career. The referee had actually been concerned before the fight about Golota's reputation for dirty fighting, given that he'd previously bitten one opponent and head-butted another. That reputation played out in real time. The referee issued warnings and point deductions across multiple rounds for repeated low blows, and after a 6th and final low punch, sent Bowe to the canvas in the 7th round. The referee finally stopped the fight and awarded Bowe the win by disqualification. That decision, made in the middle of the ring in front of over 11,000 fans, is where the real chaos began. Almost immediately after the fight was stopped, members of Bowe's security team entered the ring and approached Golota, who had his back turned as he headed to his corner. And one of the men pushed Golota from behind, prompting Golota to respond by throwing punches, before another man, later identified as Jason Harris, began hitting Golota in the head with a walkie-talkie, opening a cut that required 11 stitches to close. That single object, a two-way radio, became the symbol of the entire night. Riddick Bowe's manager Rock Newman was held back by security during the melee, and the chaos grew so dangerous that Mayor Rudolph Giuliani, who'd come to the Garden after the fighting broke out, was ushered into one of the dressing rooms, where he remained heavily guarded for more than an hour after police cleared the arena. The fighting didn't stay contained to the ring. During the early moments of the battling, fans were stomping other fans, with the ring filled by followers of both fighters throwing punches, and most of the brawls involved black fans battling white fans in a crowd that had split largely along the lines of who they'd come to support. What started as a disqualification dispute between two boxing camps spread into the stands and turned into something closer to a riot than a post-fight scuffle. The human cost of that night went well beyond Golota's stitches. Veteran trainer Lou Duva suffered chest pains during the melee and had to be taken from ringside on a stretcher, while police worked to restore order as the fighting spread further into the crowd. A 74-year-old man, one of the most respected trainers in the sport, ended up in an ambulance because a boxing match's aftermath spiraled completely out of control. The post-fight riot ultimately led to 10 arrests, with 9 spectators rushed to the hospital. In the days that followed, police went further than just clearing the arena. 3 members of Bowe's entourage were formally arrested and charged in connection with the riot. And altogether 14 arrests were made connected to the melee, according to the New York City Police Commissioner. The man identified as having struck Golota with the walkie-talkie, Jason Harris, surrendered to police and was charged with second-degree assault and criminal possession of a weapon. This wasn't dismissed by authorities as boxing being boxing. There were formal charges, formal arrests, and a police commissioner standing at a podium explaining what had happened, the same way he might for any other violent public disturbance in the city. Bowe's own camp didn't walk away from the incident without internal fallout either. Newman charged that Golota had intentionally thrown the low blows and said the fight should have been stopped earlier, describing how he'd yelled at Golota that he couldn't risk somebody's life fighting the way he did, and calling himself Bowe's big brother figure. But Golota's own promoter saw it differently, publicly stating that Newman was the boss of the Bowe camp, was the first person into the ring, and had incited his own guys by gesturing at Golota. The two fighters actually met again 5 months later, because the boxing business doesn't stop for a riot, and the rematch drew massive interest precisely because of what had happened the first time. And once again, almost immediately after that second fight was stopped, members of Bowe's entourage entered the ring and attacked Golota, with fans of both fighters joining the melee and fights breaking out in the crowd, leading to another round of arrests and hospitalizations. It happened twice. Same two fighters, same ending, same chaos. Look across all of these stories, and a pattern starts to show up. These weren't random men who happened to throw a punch once in their lives and got unlucky enough to have it documented. These were some of the most dominant heavyweight fighters in history, men who had spent decades training their bodies and their instincts to respond to conflict with their fists. And that instinct didn't switch off just because there wasn't a referee standing nearby. Tyson grew up in a world where he'd reportedly been arrested dozens of times before he was even a teenager, and street fighting was simply how conflict got resolved, long before he ever wore a championship belt. Boxing gave that instinct structure and a paycheck, but the instinct itself never fully went away, which is exactly why a grudge with Mitch Green ended in a Harlem street rather than a rematch contract. Ali's physical confrontations were almost always tied to something deeper: respect, identity, and a rivalry with Frazier that had curdled from mutual admiration into genuine personal animosity over the years. The studio floor bear hug wasn't about money or a title shot. It was about two men who had said unforgivable things to each other in public and had finally run out of patience for pretending the cameras made it all performance. Holmes and Berbick's parking lot brawl shows something different again: pride that outlives a career. Holmes was well past his championship prime when that fight happened, with nothing on the line professionally, no title, no purse, nothing but a comment about his attitude that he wasn't willing to let slide. And the Bowe-Golota riot shows what happens when that same instinct spreads beyond the two men actually competing. When entourages, security teams, and thousands of fans who feel personally invested in a fighter's pride decide the outcome inside the ring isn't the end of the story. That night, a walkie-talkie became a weapon. A 74-year-old trainer ended up in an ambulance, and the mayor of the largest city in the country had to be tucked away in a locker room for his own safety. None of these men needed the ring to fight. That was always the uncomfortable truth sitting underneath the record books and the highlight reels. The gloves, the referee, the 12-round limit, those were never what made Tyson, Ali, Holmes, or Bowe dangerous. Those things just contained it. Take away the ropes, and the same hands that built legendary careers were still more than capable of settling things the oldest way there is.